Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey watching Married at First Sight. Let's get to the show.
Understand.
No, you're not. You're talking over me. You're being defensive. I'm over it.
Please talk to me. I won't say a single word. Katie, I want to follow you for the next...
Please do not follow me. Please leave me alone.
Katie, please talk to me.
Please do not follow me.
So I wonder if Katie wants him to follow her. She's saying she doesn't want him to follow her. Now, I recommend anyone out there, if someone says, don't follow me, do not follow them, because there's you run the risk of it being an abusive situation where the person feels like they can't get away. So I recommend, give it 15 minutes. Maybe, 15 minutes later say, so I'm not following you, but I just wanted to check in, see if you wanted to talk. If they're not ready, then don't do it. But there are some times when people actually want you to follow them. I don't recommend getting into that kind of gamemanship, if you will. So it looks like Derek is giving up, which I think is a good idea. Give her some time to calm down and then follow her. Now, you see the wine in her hand, so it looks like she is intoxicated. And even on one glass of wine, or even a half glass of wine, your brain already isn't thinking straight. So let's continue watching.
Decision day is just a week away. And I want this to work out, but I'm not really sure what's going on with Katie right now. We both started off on this trip getting along just great, but somehow it still evolved into a giant argument. And it's really confusing. I don't know how we got here.
Okay, so let's watch how the two of them open up this new chapter in the conflict. How do you open it? Take responsibility for your feelings. Validate the other person. This is how you open it. For Katie, it would be something like, okay, look, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm really upset. I feel very rejected. When I watch you flirting or talking with other women, it really feels bad to me. I feel alone. I feel underappreciated. It makes me question everything about our marriage, even coming on this TV show. And it's humiliating. I'm hurt. And also, I wish you would initiate more, because it would indicate to me that you love me. And I'm really angry right now, and I'm very upset, and I don't know what I'm looking for, and I'm confused. So that would be one way to open up from Katie's. From Derek's position, it would be something like, Katie, I'm feeling hurt that you were yelling at me earlier, but I'm willing to listen, and I feel like you're accusing me of flirting and kind of as a form of infidelity, which I find to be very hurtful that you would think that of me, because that's not really who I am. And I can see that you would be hurt, that you don't feel very loved by me, or that I'm attracted to you. I think that's what you're saying to me, and I want to tell you that I do have tremendous feelings for you, and I am attracted to you. As I've been saying from the beginning, I'm still trying to connect with that spark for you, and there have been times when I feel like that is present, but I feel like you are being a little harsh with me right now, and I feel like that's not really fair to me. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know what's happening, and if I were in your shoes, maybe I would see something different. I don't know. Okay, that's the way you open a conflict conversation, or something along those lines. You take responsibility, you validate, you raise the notion that maybe you're wrong. That's a wonderful way to start a conversation, is to say, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what's happening right now. I kind of feel like I have an idea of what's happening, but I've been wrong in the past, and maybe I'm wrong. Even if you don't really believe it, because in the moment you're escalated and you're like, I know I'm right. Usually when you're in conflict, people get real sure of themselves. And then later on think back, it's like, wow, I was really sure of myself, and I was wrong in that moment. The more you actually recognize that you were wrong in the past, the more, the greater chance in the moment you're going to remember, wait, and tomorrow, am I going to look back at my attitude right now and think that I was off? It's a wonderful skill to have. I've worked my whole life on that skill, the ability to look back and say, like, oh man, I was in a bad mood, even though I didn't even really know I was in a bad mood yesterday. And boy, was my attitude bad. I had a real weird negative attitude about things. And now looking back, I can see it for what it is. But in the moment, I was just in it. And the more you do that over and over again and reflect back, the more differentiated you can be in the moment. That's one of the people often ask me, how to become more differentiated? That's one of the ways. So let's see how they open chapter 2 of the fight.
I'm sorry for speaking over you. You're right. I did get defensive. I apologize. I want to hear what you have to say right now.
Hallelujah. I get chills hearing Derek provide such differentiated opening to a conflict. Let's just hear that again. It was glorious.
I'm sorry for speaking over you. You're right. I did get defensive. I apologize. I want to hear what you have to say right now.
I've already told you. It's like I'm here and we're with all these other wives, you know, who are not having a great time with their husbands.
Okay.
You're showing them even more affection and like attention and understanding and friendship than you show me. Do you think other wives would let that go? Because they wouldn't.
So Katie's pretty escalated right now, and she is communicating, I think, her hurt. There's another way to communicate that, which is in a non-triangulated, more differentiated manner. People sometimes ask me, what is triangulation? Well, it's complicated, but just to give you an example here, the less differentiated you are, the more likely you are to triangulate. And by the way, if you want to hear all my deep dives on differentiation, become a patron of the podcast. You can listen. I talk about Murray Bowen and his theory from multiple different angles, differentiation. I teach it as a professor. It's a pretty complicated idea, but triangulation is an idea put forth by Murray Bowen. It's a family therapy theory. But anyway, so instead of saying something like, I feel very hurt, I don't feel very special, I feel like you don't treat me the way that I want you to treat me, that would be a differentiated stance. Instead, she's triangulating. She's saying, do you think that other women would put up with this? So it's a subtle triangulation. Instead of saying, I don't want to put up with this, that's an I statement, that's an I position. I cannot put up with the fact that you don't treat me well. Okay, that's taking ownership. That's differentiation. But it takes maturity. It takes the ability to think straight in the moment. It takes relatively low emotionality or low reactivity in the moment. It takes trust that the other person will hear that. So there's this tendency to justify yourself by triangulating. So she's triangulating these mystery other wives. Do you think other women would put up with this kind of behavior? And that's going to make it more difficult for Derek to hear that. If Katie says, I don't want to put up the fact that you don't treat me well, that you don't treat me like in a way that makes me feel loved. I don't feel like you treat me that way. Derek cannot argue with that. Derek just has to say, oh, well, and then he can engage in that conversation. There's no debate there. If she says, do you think other women, if Katie says, do you think other women would put up with that? It's possible that Derek would be like, well, I actually imagine that other women would put up with that. I think other women actually might not react the way you're reacting right now. So now you're into another debate. Now you're arguing about these hypothetical other women instead of directly communicating about what your experience is. But it takes a lot of differentiation, meaning that you were raised in a differentiated way, you had differentiated parents. When you have differentiation in the family as a whole, the children tend to emerge into adulthood with more differentiation. And it's possible that she wasn't modeled that anxiety went through the family in a fused manner, which makes it harder for her to just speak from an I position. Let's continue watching.
You're showing them even more affection and like attention and understanding and friendship than you show me. Do you think other wives would let that go? Because they wouldn't.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm just trying to be me.
How frustrating do you think that is for me to see that you can't be real with me, but then you can be real with everyone else?
Because they want to have a freaking conversation with me.
You don't act like that with me.
I want to. I thought I have been.
How long am I supposed to wait for you to act like that with me?
How long am I supposed to wait for you to figure out that I don't think I've done anything wrong?
Okay, so this is going as I would think it would go, given the way that Katie is perpetually accusing him of being a bad person, essentially. She's saying, how long do I have to wait? What, and she's angry, and she is basically accusing him of doing something wrong. There's a different way to communicate this, which is the I position of, I feel sad and I feel unloved by you. I feel like you don't love me with the intensity that I would wish my husband would love me. I'm guessing that for Derek, that would not trigger him as much. Instead, she's being accusatory and aggressive with him. He's trying to listen, but then he reaches his point where he feels like, I'm just being attacked for no reason here. I feel like I have been loving towards her. I feel like I have treated her well. Why is she yelling at me right now? I was just being nice to Taylor, and now I'm being yelled at by my wife. I don't think that this is fair. And then he starts to come back with his own anger. Now, there's a differentiated way he could communicate this, which is, okay, honey, I feel like you're yelling at me a lot, and I don't feel like I deserve that. I have an impulse to get real defensive and yelly right now, and I know that that's bad. Our couples therapist told us that I shouldn't do that. And so I am going to refrain, but could you try to not speak with such contempt about me? Because I don't feel like that's very fair. I get that you're frustrated, and I get that you have a lot of feelings right now, but could you not yell at me? It hurts my feelings. So that's a good way to divert it away from the style of conversation that you don't want it to be in. A lot of times it has to do with tone. I will often talk with clients about how to communicate about tone, because a lot of it has to do with tone. And I'm guessing right now that that's what it is for Derek. Is like, I don't mind her being upset. I don't mind her being hurt. I don't want her to be hurt. But I'm willing to listen to that. But when she has that tone of aggression and accusation and contempt for me, it hurts. And I don't know what to do with that. And then it freaks me out. So now then Derek comes back with bad tone as well, meaning tone of voice, the vibe you're giving across. So let's rewind and watch that again.
How long am I supposed to wait for you to act like that with me?
How long am I supposed to wait for you to figure out that I don't think I've done anything wrong at all?
I've seen you at this point initiate conversation with girls, and it's way better than you do with me. And you don't act like a loser or a weirdo with everyone else.
Because I'm
It's
actually
just with
being
me.
myself.
Stop with your excuses. I initiate everything, Derek.
Whenever I try putting myself out of my
Then
own
do
shoes,
that with
you
me.
should just shoot me down.
So now he's engaging in that always/never statements. Whenever I try to initiate, you shoot me down. So these kinds of statements illuminate a contempt that is building. And when you're in the middle of a conflict, contempt usually emerges, at least temporarily. But you rinse and repeat this enough times, and this is a classic moment of a deteriorating couple, in which the statements of contempt start to be said and start to be believed, and then over time, the contempt will sustain itself even though you're not in conflict with the person. So her contempt for him that's building is, you even said it, like, why are you a loser around me? That's pretty strong language. You're a loser around me. And you never initiate. And you're not a good husband, okay? And from his contempt, he's thinking, you always shoot me down. And you're always accusing me of things that are unfair. And in the moment of conflict, it's normal for those to emerge. But if this continues, then the contempt is just going to be all the time. And that is almost a sure sign of the end of a relationship. Research shows that once contempt emerges in a couple, the relationship will likely end very soon after that.
I am so f***ing done.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. They've pulled themselves back from the brink before, and they're both intoxicated, so it's not uncommon to have a big fight during intoxication, wake up the next day and go like, what was that all about? 90% of what happened for me last night was just because I was a little drunk. So maybe that'll happen. I don't know. We'll see.
Katie is pretty much just tuned me out. But I want to resolve this. I don't want this argument just going on. I want to do everything I can to resolve it tonight.
Okay, so what would be a differentiated way for Derek to get this going? It would be to validate that she feels rejected and that she would like him to initiate more and that she would like to feel special. And to validate that a lot. And when she comes back with anger, because it's likely to result in her letting down her guard and then letting out a lot of anger and frustration, you hear that and you validate it. And maybe she's going to say things that don't make a lot of sense, like you never initiate or you never treat me well. If you can, you hear it because the person is upset and they're going to say things that are a little exaggerated. The analogy I always give is you're teaching your 8-year-old daughter how to ride a bike. And she's nervous and she wants to ride the bike. And it becomes that moment when you let go of the bike and she goes off on her own. And she hits a bump and she crashes and she skins her knee and she starts to cry. And you run up to her and you say, "Are you okay?" And she snaps back at you and says, "It's all your fault. You let go. You should never let go." Now, in that moment, you're thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense, honey, because that's part of the learning process. And plus, you said you wanted me to let go. So I don't understand why you're being so irrational in this moment. No parent is going to say that. No good parent is going to say that. Good parents in the moment recognize the child is completely freaking out. They're scared. They're hurt. And they're going to say things that aren't going to make a lot of sense, that are going to come from a fused emotional state. Then when they calm down, you might not even address it. You might just say, get them to calm down, and then eventually the kid's back on the bike and you're helping them again. Now, you might say, so earlier when you said it was all my fault, I just want to say that kind of hurt my feelings. But you don't say that right away. So for Derek, he could look at Katie as emotionally, she is someone who just fell off of her bike. Now, some people will say, well, those are kids. Katie's an adult and she's a therapist. Well, I have a news flash for you. Just because you turn 18 does not significantly alter your brain. The same emotions and reactivity that we have as children do not disappear when we get our driver's license. That should be obvious. Just because you're 30 or 65 years old does not mean you're fundamentally a different creature or species than you were when you were 7 years old. We just learn ways of masking it a lot of the times. Children are much more free when they're raised well enough to be normal and to be reactive. Now, as adults, we have much more shame and all these other things. Now, in the best of all worlds, we learn how to heal from our past and also learn to regulate our emotions better as adults. But our foundational reactivity is exactly the same. So anyway, let's see how Derek does in this situation.
I'm sorry for fighting with you. I didn't want to. But we can talk about it more tomorrow.
I just need a word so I know you.
Okay, so it's definitely a functional thing to say, for sure. I'm sorry. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm dedicated. He's giving all these messages of, I'm dedicated to this relationship. I'm not super upset. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to work this out. There's a lot of messages in basically what he just said. He could have poured it on a little bit more by guessing at what her feelings are, guessing at what those sore spots are that she needs to be validated. But, on the scale of things, it's fantastic. And, what we see other couples do on this show and other shows I react to, it's definitely a very, very functional and warm and compassionate thing to do. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining me out there. Please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.